So you listened to the tape, and then I guess you had this awareness experience.
Yeah, I had an awakening experience.
Okay.
Because as I see it, awakening experientially relates to the idea you have about who you are, which is seen to be simply an appearance arising in and as what you are. So awakeness is already awake, but within that awakeness there is the apparent appearance of someone who dissolves into that full wakefulness.
So wakefulness sees that.
Yes, and is one with that experientially.
Okay. And whatever that was, now let's go trying to be who it thinks it is. Is that?
The idea of trying to be something is already seen as an experience.
Okay. And then it's seen over and over again. I mean, if
awakeness sees that, experiences that, and there is an unfoldment, an apparent unfoldment relating to that.
Okay. So would you say that experience was the beginning of the unfoldment? No, it's been unfolding all along.
Yes, but it's the experiential recognition of that as an unfoldment. Okay. It's like life is seen as it truly is, which has always been the case. And then there is an apparent surrendering to that, which is always the case, time and time again.
Okay.
Time-bound recognition of the timeless, which is seen as just an appearance also.
Okay.
In and as that which is already the case.
So now when you went, I assume at some point you went to bed and then got up the next day. I ask this because sometimes I'll look around, the trees are, it's amazing, kind of this opening comes after meditating maybe, or just listening to somebody or something. And it's just amazing. And it's like I know when I go to bed and wake up the next day, it's going to be gone. I mean, that's been the experience.
Okay.
So, but for you, so you went to bed at some point. When you woke up, what was it like when you woke up?
Well, I actually had quite a busy weekend, as I recall, following what had apparently been recognized. And so the mind was plunged into confusion. I was around people that were talking all the time. I was around, busyness. And it was almost as if what had been recognized and the experience were completely out of sync with one another, which is impossible. But because it was so radical, what had been recognized was so radical, so sudden, there was just all sorts of things that were getting thrown up by the mind experientially. So there was like a haze of confusion. And so even though that was seen as just confusion, that had to play itself out somehow. Mm-hmm. That had to go through a certain period of transition, which lasted many weeks and months actually.
Okay. So during that time there was confusion?
There wasn't confusion about what had been seen,
okay.
But life as it was appearing to be very chaotic and confusing and problematic.
So not blissful?
No.
Okay.
There was a peace, but there was a lot of chaos happening simultaneously.
And this was basically happening involuntarily, because you didn't will it to happen. Maybe?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think life seems to create what we place our attention on. The idea we have about who we are, life seems to create those experiences based on how we believe them to be. Mm-hmm. And so there was the residual effect of that happening, which seemed to be in contradiction to what had been recognized.
Okay. So there's the recognition and then there's the apparent contradiction to the recognition.
I'm not saying it's the same for everybody.
Right, okay.
This is my experience.
Okay, that's good to know, yeah.
I think awakening manifests in different ways. There is what could be considered to be a very radical and sudden, time-bound experience, awakening to true nature, which can seem as if life is presenting in a way that is then contradictory to what has been experienced. There can seem to be an invisible recognition of life as it truly is. The active spiritual seeker, for example, who is seeking this recognition actively. And life is moving in accordance with that recognition. So it's like a seamless, timeless awakening. No memory-bound experience. And yet, using memory, one can look back and see that there was a time when one was actually not in alignment with recognition. Mm-hmm. And there can be momentary glimpses of awakening, and then the personality takes over again. So I think it very much depends on how that awakening experience appears to manifest experientially, as to then what happens in the unfoldment after that recognition.
So I guess one could talk to 100 different teachers and they would all have a different, or 100 different people who've awakened, you could say. They'd all have a different awakening experience.
Yes. The awakening is the same, irrespective, because you're waking up to life as it truly is, which is the timeless nature of life. And yet, the way that experience of awakening seems to manifest can be very different, mm-hmm. depending on the expression of that.
So the common thing is the timeless nature.
Yes.
Awareness.
Yes.
Of the timeless nature, or awareness as the timeless nature.
Realizing what life is and always has been. So pure awareness, pure presence. Losing the personal sense of self. Awakening to impersonal consciousness, okay. Which is always the case. And yet how that awakening experience, because awakening experiences always relate to the idea we have of who we are, that seems to take various forms experientially.
Is there, I could say, practical value in losing the personal sense of self?
Awakening has profound benefit to the human experience.
Okay.
And inherent qualities of our true nature are peace, love, joy, bliss, knowing that everything is always as it's meant to be. And so, experientially, it's about surrendering to that recognition and remembering that time and time again. Mm-hmm. It's a time-bound process that seems to open up into timeless nature. What a paradox.
Yeah. But for people who have like a chronic pain or the fibromyalgia, these, I guess for anything really, but these kind of illnesses, is there benefit?
Definitely. I think the primary benefit is to recognize that which is beyond appearance, first of all. And that isn't to diminish the fact that chronic pain can be very debilitating. Mm-hmm. But have we ever noticed, if we look in our direct experience, say if we cut ourselves superficially, for example, because the superficial cuts tend to be the most painful, right? Paper cut or something like that. And then we're immersed in a great movie, for example, or we're immersed in a great conversation or enjoying ourselves. We can divert our attention to that experience rather than the paper cut. So when we place our attention on the paper cut, it hurts. And yet when we immerse ourselves in the experience of living whatever experience seems to be more enjoyable in that moment. We can lose the sense of hurt from the paper cut. And so this can actually be experienced directly when we are recognizing our true nature. There can be a focus on that which is beyond all experience, beyond chronic pain, primarily, which then can help to diminish any discomfort, any suffering that can be taking place. And secondarily, we can do whatever seems to be necessary. So if the body's uncomfortable, we can change our position, for example. We may need to go into a state of deep relaxation to allow the body to feel more comfortable in that way. We could take some painkillers if that is necessary as well. But primarily, the most important thing is actually experiential recognition. Secondarily, doing what seems to be required in the moment, so it isn't the absence of any conventional treatment.
Do you think things like, again, pain cause you to focus in on the...
It seems to create an illusory focal point that becomes consumes the entire experience. Whereas when we rest back in the timeless nature of ourself, suddenly there's a spaciousness around what seems to be experienced. Suddenly all sorts of possibilities open up that we're not missing when we have our blinkers and our focus on a particular experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's relying ever more deeply on the impersonal nature of life as a primary focus, beyond all cause. And then secondarily, doing what appears to be appropriate from that place of recognition.
Okay, so you shift your attention back, try to the timeless awareness.
Yes,
away from...
Yes, that appears to be very powerful.
Okay.
Experientially, in terms of placing our allegiance on that which is always here, which is always stable, which is always awake, which is beyond any cause. And therefore, we're much better placed to move consciously within the experience.
Okay. And that's really true for any experience. Well, I guess any experience, good or bad, right?
Because we're going beyond while not escaping.